Hi, this is Catherine, this is Taking Tea with Catherine, and this is Jane Austen's black tea blend from Simpson and Vale, which has black teas of different kinds, not mentioned which ones, spearmint, lavender, and vanilla. So it's a pretty nice combination, kind of a refreshing, even for the summer tea. And it's Jane Austen. For some reason, it's Jane Austen. I don't know why this particular flavor would remind someone of Jane Austen, but that's okay. And so I thought I'd do a kind of a mid-month check-in, but for Jane Austen July. I haven't done one of those mid-month things in a while, I don't think. Mainly because my reading amounts have been not up to, like what I think it should be up to. So that halfway through the month, I'm like, well, what am I going to talk about? So, so I'm going to tell you what I finished first. And maybe a little bit about it. I'd probably do a wrap-up at the end of the month as well, but, we can talk about things more than once, right? Especially Jane Austen. There, it bears going over a number of times. So let me see what the first book that I finished was. I put all kinds of stickers in it. I don't know why. Jane Austen, the Banker's Sister by E.J. Clary. And I saw this on Katie from Books and Things had mentioned it in a haul, and I thought, wow, that's great, so I got it. And she also read this for Jane Austen July and had some things to say about it, which basically I had almost the exact same things to say about it. As a book, it's good. It's a good book. It's always nice to read nonfiction about Jane Austen's life in any form. And it gets a little bit into the financial systems, which is kind of where I go a little... like I'm not really sure what to do with it, but the only thing I didn't like was there was a bit of a weird conjecture about Jane's relationship with her brother Henry, which the book is about her being the banker's sister, but I have no problem with them being close, but there was just hints at maybe they were too close, and I was like, are you trying to, say something that incestuous or whatever? And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Do you understand what it is like to be close to a sibling, and even very, very close, but just close? I don't understand. I don't have that I know of any brothers. I have brothers-in-law, but that doesn't count necessarily. So I don't really know where, I don't quite understand the dynamic of a brother-sister relationship 100% beyond what I've read. But I have sisters, and I think the basic feeling of being close to a sibling is being close to a sibling, So that's a little weird, especially because most of the time, the Austen family were thankfully close, because when I say thankfully, it's because some of them would go into rough times, and so someone else would have to kind of look after, everybody had to be there for each other at some point or another. And, so it was good that they had that support system. Not every family did. So it was great that they were close. But when I think of the strong sibling relationship, I think of Jane and her sister Cassandra. That they were just intensely close, but in a perfectly lovely way. So that, it began to ruin the story for me, this book. Otherwise, it would have been a good book. Otherwise, I would recommend it. So if you could just overlook that part, it's like if you're reading about Shakespeare and someone decides to get a little bit into, did he really write Shakespeare? And they're a little bit too much about maybe he didn't. It's like, you could say all you want about that, but I don't know. But that's another issue altogether. The one thing I liked about this book, that there were a little bit of suggestions as to where she got certain names from, like that she, the name Wentworth and Wickham were kind of place names that she knew of in her life. And let me see. Oh, I liked talking about Mansfield Park. She mentions how that it was the first Condition of England novel, anticipating the achievements of Elizabeth Gaskell, Charles Dickens, and George Eliot. So I kind of like the fact that people always think of Jane Austen as this kind of like, oh, it's all about just marriage and women all dressed up and walking in little gardens and drinking tea, and And I mean, some of that happens, but but it's not just romance. There is something societal in some of her books, which you have to really be able to concentrate to see that. So I'm trying to see what else oh yeah, there was a little part about when Henry was going through some difficult times, and he went with some of the family to Switzerland, and talks about the time period that he was there, arriving in late July or early August. The Austen night party would have coincided at Geneva with Byron and the Shelleys, and Henry probably heard rumors about his scandalous compatriots. At the Villa Deodati, is that how you pronounce it? Byron's villa, just outside the city, Mary Shelley dreamt up the story of Frankenstein. I just think that's amazing that any relation of Jane Austen's could have been like in the area when that scene happened. I was thinking about that scene a lot more recently because the latest season, we call it season in the United States, of Doctor Who had an episode devoted to that whole thing. They made kind of an obvious choice as to actually how Frankenstein would have been inspired. It was a little too obvious, but that's okay. It was still good. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to point out from this book because I'm going to be going on and on. I did find it interesting a little bit about how much money Cassandra had at the end of her life. They talk about that a little bit because they're going to talk about money in this book. And I just thought, I mean, I kind of like the fact that she did a good job of investing and everything, so that by the end of life she was able to leave substantial legacies to certain people. I don't know. I don't read about that too often, so I admired that. And the other tie-in I can have to all the other things that I'm into is that this book focuses a little bit on how Jane Austen is featured, I think presently still, on the £10 note in the UK after I think it was like the 200th anniversary of her death around that time. So I was like, what is it with characters or people, real people, who end up on currencies of 10 that I am so into? Between her and Alexander Hamilton, it's like, I don't know. I guess if you got 10 related to you, you're going to attract my attention. Who's my favorite doctor? David Tennant, the 10th Doctor. I don't know. I'm seeing connections where I shouldn't. I've been indoors way too much lately. Although I did go out yesterday. Took a really nice walk. Beautiful day. I love when we have a beautiful day we can't complain about. But most of this month has been a very let's stay in the air conditioning and read time, which I've been doing plenty of, but never reading as much as one thinks one should. I also have been, I also reread Two Guys Read Jane Austen. I don't know. Maybe I'll go over this on my other wrap-up because there's just so much here. And I'm going to spend like half an hour if I keep going into every single book. So we'll hold off on that. The one thing I liked, though, and I haven't reread Mansfield Park in a billion years, but in this book, these two men have like an email correspondence between themselves. They read different things and like their little tiny book club, and they just discuss things as they're reading them. They're very old friends, and it's just a different perspective than what I'm personally used to. I read so many Jane Austen people's perspectives, mostly from female perspective, not entirely obviously, but I constantly get people saying, well, even now, I don't really want to read Jane Austen. It's probably for women, so I'm going to read X male author. And I'm like, I want to bring up things like this because there are so many good, entertaining and informative things to learn from Jane Austen, no matter who you are, what walk of life you come from. So don't. But one thing I'm just going to bring up now is that they were reading Pride and Prejudice and then Mansfield Park. And they pointed out something that I don't think I noticed before. I mean, I read it in this book before, but that's like 10 years ago, so I forgot. But they pointed out in, this is maybe the slightest spoiler, in Mansfield Park, how Lady Bertram, who is kind of in the book as this very wealthy, kind of lays around, doesn't do anything. She's not a bad person. She's just, well, in a way, she kind of neglects her family, just is always just laying around with her dogs, and she's perfectly nice to Fanny Price, the main character, but she's not necessarily looking out for her, you feel like. So you don't think of her as observing anything, but at one point, because there's a lot in Mansfield Park about play acting, and she says to a certain character that he's a very good actor or something along those lines, and they realize that line could be very. What did Jane Austen actually mean that Lady Bertram saw something that no one else saw, and that's kind of cool, because I always, almost every adaptation I've seen, at least especially the most recent one, they'll make it like, oh yeah, secretly she was really looking out for Fanny Price and she was really on the ball. She just kind of, doesn't really show it. I'm like, no, I don't know. So I'd like to think that she did have a little bit of something going on for her, but I don't know. So anyway, that's just one thing you can see. Whenever I read any kind of anecdotes or commentaries from somebody who's reading Jane Austen, you'll always hear, especially, well, I'm not going to say especially people who are writers but often people who are in some kind of involvement with books and writing, etc., that, you will always see something that you did not see. And I like that, because that's the only reason why I think I am kind of antisocial when it comes to reading. Like, I'm in book clubs, but I tend to be more solitary when it comes to reading. But I also think that it is good to discuss books with other people, because you will see things that, and you will observe something that someone else didn't observe. So, yeah, okay. So what else am I? Okay, I finished Emma, second time in my life, and I'm going to do a ranking, I think, still this month. I did a ranking, actually. I an updated ranking of all the books of Jane Austen, all the 6 books, the main 6 novels of Jane Austen, and my ranking from worst to best. Did it last year. I was quite certain of that order, and I've changed some things in my mind since then, since rereading certain things, since deeply thinking about things. I'm not losing sleep over it, don't worry. And I did a video of my re-ranking, and I deleted it because I wasn't ready. Like, I feel like my rereading hadn't been complete this month, and I wanted to have a really fresh perspective, and it wasn't quite fresh. So I deleted it, and it's too bad, because I had my contacts on, so it's so rare that I actually get to look like I've made an effort. But that's not what this channel is for. Anyway, okay, so I finished Emma. I loved it. Like I say in every ranking, everything, all of Jane Austen's books in my book is 5-star. Maybe my least favorites could be 4.5 stars. Goodreads, for instance, does not allow for half stars, which I don't understand. But I will probably just keep them all at 5-star, just because to me they all are. And that's why it's hard to rank them, because it's like, if they're all 5-star, how could one be worse than the other? And it's not a matter of really worse, it's just that I like other ones better. So I found out, spoiler alert for my ranking, that I love Emma. It is a great, clever story. The characters are, to me, well written. The situations are hilarious. I've already rewatched Clueless as well and seen so many of the comparisons, and this is still my least favorite of Jane Austen's books. And I do not knock other people who call this her favorite or one of their favorites. This is just my perspective, and that's perfectly fine. So yes, again, tune in for a future ranking. There are other changes too. So let's see, what else did I finish? I also finished, not this whole book, but Lady Susan, that I had chosen for other writings of Jane Austen that were not in the, not her 6 main novels. Lady Susan, some would like to put in like her 7th novel, like this is still a novel of hers. It is a novella. I would almost count it, but I don't know. I feel like it's okay that it's not counted. I kind of think it's fine in this edition. I did like Lady Susan. It was the second time I read it, but I think when I read it the last time, it had been probably over 20 years ago, and I just read it and didn't think much of it. I didn't put much thought into it, so I didn't remember a lot, but some things were somewhat familiar, and I know the movie Love and Friendship is supposed to be based on it, and I saw the beginning of it on an airplane and got tired and didn't finish watching it. I thought it was hilarious. It was a rarity of Jane Austen's stories that weren't in her, that the juvenilia is all a bit crazy and stuff, but Lady Susan has the main character is a lot older than most of her main characters, and just a completely different situation. She's a mother, she's a widow, she's not a nice person, and I don't necessarily say I'm rooting for her, but it's so interesting to see how she can just manipulate her way into life. It is quite fascinating. And it's epistolary, which doesn't really up it in its favor for me. But it's okay, because it's not long enough to be painfully epistolary for me. So those are the ones that I finished. These are the books that I am in either the middle of or at least well into. Like this book, let's see, page 70. So that's, yeah, past the 50 mark. I figure I'm into it already. And that's Pemberton Shades. It's kind of like a semi-gothic story. Post Pride and Prejudice, which I'm still, to be honest, I haven't settled. This is a slight spoiler for Pride and Prejudice, but most people know the ending of Pride and Prejudice. So I haven't really found a Pride and Prejudice sequel involving the Darcys that I particularly feel is really good. I've read other books based on Pride and Prejudice, like the other Bennet sister, Longbourn, for instance, that are very creative and are somehow wrapped around the Pride and Prejudice story. Even they don't always, even in their cases though, when they focus at all on the Darcys, I don't feel particularly like I'm enjoying the Darcys. I think I like them in Pride and Prejudice, and after that, I don't really need to know much more, and yet I still find myself reading these. But like I said, it hasn't got that far. It hasn't hit too much of the action yet, so I'm gonna keep going. I'm just not enthralled, but that's okay. Am I enthralled with this particular book? Yes. This is actually hard to hold up. I was going to use my lighter version, but I figured I'm still at home. I might as well use the big one with recipes in it. Pride and Prejudice, I said I was going to just keep up with the Goodreads read along and just do the chapters. Like I basically did that with Emma. I read every day what the prescribed amount of chapters were. At the very ending, I decided to read a little more because I was just getting impatient. And that was it. But with Pride and Prejudice, I don't know. I just wanted to keep going. So all the other books that I've been wanting to read or starting or whatever, I just suddenly put it aside, and I am up to, in this one, page 138, which we are visiting Mr. Collins. So a lot of stuff is about to happen, and I am quite excited about that because every time we get to this point, it's just thrilling. So I am just, that is my current status right now, reading Pride and Prejudice. That is all. But I still have Pemberton Shades to continue with, and I have hair in my... Excuse me. Yeah, okay, no one wants eating hair with Catherine. Okay, this is a book I started. When I say I started, I literally looked at the first page and said, this looks like it could be good, but I am already reading 2 novels, even though they're related. I'm already reading 2 novels, and I'm going to get confused, so I do intend to go forward with this one. But Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho. I feel so overdue with reading this, and I have this on my TBR for this month. I really do hope that I will make more progress. I don't mind if I don't finish it in July. I really don't, but I really want to make progress because I said this in a recent video, but I already have like tons of classics that I'm in the middle of that I am continuing every month a few pages at a time, and I don't want to make this that as well. This, that, and the other. So we'll see. It is a different feeling. I kind of wish I would have read it last year with Northanger Abbey. But I read Evelina instead to kind of go with Northanger Abbey, and it was a similar story, so to Northanger Abbey, so in a way that worked out well anyway. So I don't know. So okay, I keep saying so what? All right, so I can't stop. Anyway, so there's a so can't stop, won't stop. I mentioned I started Revolutionary Brothers because I figured it was a continuation of my reading, like American Revolution, time period, history, or, you know, somewhat in the lifespan of Jane Austen as well, but I haven't really gotten that far in it, so we'll see with that. But it does look interesting, and there's just so much I can read. Here's a book that I received recently in the mail, and I hate the front is a little dented because it was promised to be like new. I think it got dented in delivery, but I'm not going to make that big of a deal of a tiny dent. I'm just that person who gets annoyed. To me, if I'm reading a book that has a dent in it, I want it to be dirt cheap, not just a little bit cheap. But anyway, so I thought I would read a mystery, like a proper mystery, because of my habit of reading mysteries every month. I'm doing a TM mystery, and I thought, what could I read that's related to Jane Austen? And I found a series. I feel like at least maybe my sister or somebody read some of these books and they said it was okay, but not like anything to write home about. But this is Jane and the Unpleasantness at Scargrave Manor. Man, I forget as soon as I look away, man. My short-term memory is terrible. By Stephanie Barron. Kind of like this thing here. I think I have that as part of my Jane Austen action figure set. It's kind of like, I guess, a cozy mystery situation where Jane Austen finds herself in the middle of solving mysteries. You know, this is not exactly a new idea. Every character, every real life author or fictional character has found themselves being written in as a person who solves mysteries. I know Shakespeare, there were Shakespeare mysteries, and do you know what actually turned me off from those? There was a mention of a person in the book, this is Shakespeare's time, going to meet somebody for afternoon tea. And I was like, I think it was afternoon tea, but it was definitely tea. So, I mean, afternoon tea would have been horrible because afternoon tea itself, as a concept, came about in Victorian times. But tea, even. People did not use the word tea in Shakespeare's time in England. Tea was, I don't know if it was at all in the boundaries of English shores, but it just, like, it's okay. I know they drank, they imbibed infusions, herbal infusions, which now we call tea. I have no problem with that, but to use that word in a Shakespearean era fictional novel, I don't know. It just, the tea purist in me, the tea historian in me, just like literally shut the book and said, I'm done. So I am not a proper novel writer. I've written novels, but I didn't have them published because they weren't good enough. But if I were a professional person who was writing about a different time period, there would be, I think, certain words. I wouldn't get crazy. I remember reading about Edna St. Vincent Millay, the poet, one of my favorite poets, and when she was doing some writing, she was writing about Saxon times, and she was doing some serious research to make sure that words that she was using would have been somewhat in use during that time. And it was like, wow, that's a little too much scholarliness for me. But anyway, so hopefully I will like this, and if I don't, it's just a cozy mystery. I didn't spend that much money on it. And I still haven't started Camp Austen. My Life as an Accidental Jane Austen Superfan by Ted Scheinman. We'll see if I get to this month. There's just so much to read. And this is something I received in the mail the other day. It comes out in the United States, I think, in September. But I just wanted to get hold of it, and they had the paperback of it. I love that. I guess in the UK they will maybe release paperbacks at the same time as hardcover sometimes, which I think is fantastic. Jasperford's The Constant Rabbit. I really hope I like this one. I know it's not Jane Austen, although some of his books have had Jane Austen characters in them, but I am hoping, because just a little bit of description, I'm hoping it's closer to like his nursery crimes, like the Fourth Bear books, than Early Riser, which was his last book that I might end up liking if I just couldn't get into it though. So we'll see. We'll see. I do intend to start reading that soon, whether or not it's Jane Austen July. So it's taking me out of Jane Austen July a little bit, but the other book, it never ends. The other book I ordered recently, and I will probably get it next week, is, because it's coming out next week, is the, what was it called? The Austen Years, I think, and it is a memoir of a woman and 5 of her novels. I don't know which one she leaves out. And just her life reading them and her thoughts. And I like that kind of thing. Like I mentioned before, I love reading about people reading Jane Austen. It's just, yes, we are together. This is great. So that'll be a nice little extra if I can get to it. They're I like memoirs anyway, so, and I love reading memoirs. Oh, it's just so manly. So I think I've talked enough. I need to spend a little less time talking, a little more time reading, but I just thought I'd keep you up to speed with what I've been reading and not reading. I will get maybe further into some of these books when I do a wrap up, but until then, this is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and Jane Austen filled day. So that is the end.